All right. Well, hey, welcome everybody to the now sixth episode or sixth installment of the virtual executive roundtable, the Perigee virtual executive roundtable. I'm excited to get us going. And as you know, we come together to share perspective, connection, and encouragement. So sometimes perspective comes from hearing from somebody else, sharing what they're seeing in the world or what they're out there doing. Connection comes sometimes live in the session where we have some active discussion, and that's really cool. Sometimes it happens offline. I know there's some business that's happened. It's so fun to see. And then encouragement, sometimes it's an idea. Sometimes it's just encouraging someone, telling them what they need to hear when they need to hear it. Sometimes it's through prayer. As I've mentioned, I pray for everybody on the Zoom. Before or after, if you want to join me in prayer, let me know. If you have any prayer requests, let me know. And here's our format, just to remind you. So it's interactive. Yeah, we use some polls. Your cameras and microphones are live, at least for the panelists, for the Perigee Inner Circle. Please remember to keep it muted unless you're talking. But this has worked out pretty well, especially late in the call. So we'll start off with a little bit of talk show style, and then later in the call, we'll open up the mics and have more of a round robin and a lot more interactive discussion then. So the model is, like I said, we have the Perigee Inner Circle is what in the Zoom webinar technology, they make you a panelist and everybody else is an attendee. The attendees can also participate by raising hands or sending a message into Q&A. And panelists, if y'all wouldn't mind helping me out and just kind of keeping an eye on that. I do it too, but it's a little tough when you're talking to monitor all of that. So I appreciate your help. Y'all have done a great job of that in the past. We have a hot topic this morning that I'm really excited about. It's all about selling. And so it's selling hasn't changed or it has changed and yet it hasn't. So, the fundamentals are the same. Of course, but man, it's a different time and there are some differences. There are some things that we're seeing out there. And so I know we have some great sellers on the Zoom. And so we're gonna have some great discussion. And we have a co-host here this morning. I'm really excited about Brian Williams is our co-host. You can see the thumbnail you can see his face there in the thumbnail of his book, The Ultimate Sales Messaging System. And I'm gonna just take a minute to read Brian's bio. So I met Brian, let me start by how I know Brian. I met Brian, it was about 5 years ago, Brian. I kind of look back and refresh my memory. It was actually right after I started Perigee. I couldn't remember.
That's right.
So you remember. Mm-hmm. And Andrew McKinney, who's on the line, introduced me, as Andrew's introduced me to so many good folks, introduced me to you. And we became fast friends. And I've got to say, I was always impressed with Brian, and as I put his bio together, it's grown, even just in the 5 or so years since we met. So welcome, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Properly introduce you here. So
hey, man. Go for it.
Yeah, let me say, I'm going to read it because there's just so much here. So first of all, everybody, Brian, many of you already know, but Brian specializes in sales and presentations that develop charisma, empathy, and presence. He's served clients, a lot of the big names you know of, like AT&T, Motorola, and Cisco, and also many Fortune 1000, a lot of tech companies as well. Yeah, I love this. So he's, for someone who's had to work at public speaking, I always admire naturally gifted folks. And of course, he's worked on top of his gifts too, and he has achieved the top 1% national Toastmaster champion. So on a world, that means out of like 30,000 people, he was still at the top. I think it was the top 40. And
it was global.
Yeah,
just
global.
A little small clarification.
I said world. I said in the world. I didn't use the word global, but yeah, that's the same thing, right?
You said national, I think.
Oh,
it doesn't matter, man.
World. Thank you.
I'm interrupting.
Oh, you know what? I'm reading. You're right. I read national. But I knew you also are world champion. You have it. I'll show you afterwards. Somewhere it says national, either your LinkedIn or website.
Oh, really?
And then somewhere else it says world. So good catch there.
Okay, my fault.
But anyway, pretty darn good speaker, y'all. And he was featured last year in Success Magazine. He's an author, as I mentioned, of the book there. He's a keynote speaker and presenter. And then I love this. I just know this about him, although you don't see it as prominently. Brian coaches keynote speakers. So, you know, the best of the best. He teaches the best. Prior to starting his company, Perspectivity, which I guess is about 8 years ago,
Exactly.
he was a 20-year executive head of global business strategy for a major company, running a group with 20 engineers across 4 countries, a $20 million budget, and 20% plus customer growth. I will say he has I want to go ahead and get a plug in now for a virtual workshop he has coming up, and we'll probably remind you at the end again. Brian, feel free to put it in the chat, or I'll do it here shortly. But June 4th, so it's just 2 days away, coming up, virtual workshop, which is close more sales virtually than in person. I'm just going to repeat that because close more sales virtually than in person. That's a bold statement, and I can't wait. I'm signed up, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'll say Brian has joined several of my roundtables and meetings and presentations, but I haven't gotten to see him yet. So other than the video and other media that I get to see, I haven't seen him in person and live. And I will say that having a coach to keynote speakers who is a keynote speaker who's spoken to many, many people in your audience, it's a little unnerving, you know? I mean, he makes me a little nervous every time I present. I know he's the professor, he's taking notes, and, you know, if I see him shake his head, he might just be thinking about something that happened earlier in the day, but I think he's thinking, oh, Ryan. It was a lot of fun having Brian always attending and supporting. I'll say he's also a man of faith. He gives God glory for his success. He's married, father of 4. You can read some of this on his profile, but avid runner, photographer, and supports the prison and homeless ministry. And I get to call him my friend also. So thank you very much, friend and brother, for being here this morning.
Absolutely, man. Glad to be here, and hope to pack this time with as much actionable takeaways as I possibly can for you guys. And with all of that Ryan just said, I bumped into my wife in the kitchen on the way upstairs to the office, and she said, you know, I love you, right? It's like, yeah. She said, why can't you keep the pantry doors closed? You snack all the time and you always leave the pantry door. So with all of that said, man, I'm still working on something as simple as closing the pantry door after I get something out of it.
Nice. So it's not just us, huh? I think my wife and I have the reverse on that. Close the cabinet door. Hey, listen, I gotta say, Brian, I didn't tell you this. I wasn't planning on this. I just want to take a minute and acknowledge what's going on in the world. You know, Brian, I love you like a brother, and you know, we've prayed together. I would say we've cried together, but I think I was the one crying. I don't think you were. So, but no, I just think out of, you know, from an outpouring of that love, I just want to take a minute and I just want to pray for I know not everyone. I don't know where everyone is on the call, and from a faith perspective, I know we have a lot of believers, but you know, full respect for anybody who doesn't share our faith. But I want to ask everybody to join us in prayer. If that's not your thing, you can just take a minute. But I do want to invite everybody to join us. I just want to pray for healing real quick. Father God, we love you. We know you love all of us. We know you hate the hate that we're seeing in the world. And so I pray that all of us here, we've been impacted in some way, whether we've been touched personally. We pray that it does not take root in us. Pray healing in us, God. We pray that any seed of hate that is starting in any of us, you would just grab and rip it out from the roots. I know that we have kind, loving people here on this Zoom, and I pray that you protect us. You don't let any of that take hold with us. I pray that you let us be a light to others. Through that healing, you let us show others what love looks like. There's no hate, there's no racism. We're one people. You love us all, and we love you. We thank you, God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother.
Hey, yeah, so I had to. Like I said, wasn't on the agenda or anything, but I felt compelled. So, hey, let's jump in with the rest of the agenda. I'm going to and if y'all would help me, again, scan the chat. All the panelists, feel free to take an active role. I know we have really cool things get shared. There's some kind of side conversations sometimes, and sometimes you're adding in, hey, here's that link Ryan mentioned or whatever. So feel free to do that. Thank you. So let's start. Brian, I mentioned to you, we always start with just kind of a general poll, and then we'll get into the sales topic. So let's get a thumb pulse on where everybody is here. We're going to ask you to interact on this poll. You're familiar with it by this point, but if you'll go to this website, it'll be on the next screen too. And we'll ask for your response, quick response, and Brian, you and I can be talking through that. I already mentioned the raising hand in chat. The other thing is toward the end, we'll pass the mic and do a little round robin and ask for folks to share stories. So let's just open it up. Out of these 5 categories, which one are you? Go ahead, go to the website you see there on the screen, pollev.com/Perigee, and vote. So in general, your business climate, are you in crisis? You know, alarms still blaring, firefighting every day. Are you hunkered down? You know, you're kind of batting down the hatches and you're getting through the storm still. Are you pivoted, or you are in the process of pivoting? Are you emerging and you know, kind of coming out of this, or are you in high growth mode? So it's just always a kind of interesting to see where people are coming from, and let's watch as those responses are coming in. You'll see them kind of populate real time here. So Brian, we'll just get started chatting here while they're coming in. And
Okay.
So what are you seeing out there, Brian? There's 5 categories. Do you have any thoughts or reactions?
I mean, it's going to be all over, right? Depending on the market. I was asked to speak to these, the landscaping industry. Like, I didn't even know landscaping, and you know, these companies grow to like $50, $200 million a year cutting grass, man, and putting in flowers and plants. But anyway, as you know, it depends on obviously what market you're in. And, you know, like, for example, in that particular industry, if they were doing primarily commercial properties, you know, massive impact there, right? Because no one's working in these buildings, everyone's at home, so they're not choosing to pay for the landscaping around the property. So, or if you're residential, even residential, everyone's home, so they're cutting their own grass, right? So it really depends on what market you're in. And but I think, and I know we're going to get into this earlier, I can't wait to get into that part, but how do we navigate around that, man? How do we pivot throughout that? I think that's going to be key.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I'll point out just a couple of things I've noticed. One, whenever you have a small sample size, you're going to get a little more fluctuation in the numbers, right? It's not necessarily reflective of the whole. So one, that's happening. The other is we have a lot of entrepreneurs in this group. So you see a lot of optimism, which is really fun to watch. You do, so like, look, as it's coming out, we don't see anybody in crisis. No one's hunkered down. Now, if you are, please speak up. We want to hear about it. So don't let me shut you down, sway the numbers here. We've had a couple of those in the past. And then, you know, I think some of it too is that we're seeing as time goes on, the answers change. And so that's fun to see also. You know, when you're in crisis, everything just changes so quickly. We're literally seeing, I remember when we first started this and the whole CARES Act and the EDL and PPP and all that stuff. I mean, that was all anybody could think about or talk about. And you fast forward even just a week later, and that was a tired old topic, you know. So things move really quickly in crisis mode. And so we're seeing that too. So here you can see coming in, mostly folks are feeling like we're kind of coming out of this. We're emerging. You see some are still pivoting, and then we have high growth. And by the way, some, I'm sure you've seen it too, Brian, some have been in high growth from the beginning, you know, it just hasn't stopped. So we can come back and visit that. Unless you had any other thoughts on this, I'd say, why don't we jump into the sales topic?
Let's do it. All
right, cool. So let me just start with, I guess I'll say some open-ended things. Just what are you seeing out there? Just generally, what are you seeing out there? And how does it compare or contrast to what you saw, let's say, you know, 8 weeks ago, pre-COVID?
And, you know, so I've been on a lot of these kind of calls, like these kind of roundtables, CEO roundtables, either as a guest or a speaker. And you notice over time it's shifted, right? So initially there's just shock and panic and what's going on? What do we do? I mean, it was funny being on some of these calls and there were just not a lot of answers. Like there were no experts. Like no one can say, oh yeah, I've run my business through 4 pandemics. Or I mean, no one knew what to do, right? And so it's gone from that to, okay, we just can't sit around and hope something's going to happen, right? That was kind of phase 2. And then it went to pivoting, right? What are we going to do? Like, we got to move, we got to get into action. And so now you see a lot of emerging, like pivoting and emerging, meaning we realize that we can't keep doing what we've been doing, and how we're going to capitalize on the market. So take, for example, I remember this one landscaper, I was just talking about that. I spoke at their conference also, and his business just got decimated, right? So this guy, and so all these people stopped caring for their lawns because they're not paying for anything, right? So lawns are just golden, no one's green, right? So this guy creates this kind of biodegradable, I don't know what kind of paint, like all natural green, like the color of green. And he goes in these neighborhoods and he starts spray painting with this paint. Go ahead.
Real quick, he did that in the midst of all this? He innovated, or he had already created this thing?
Oh, no. It's innovation, man. Just
Okay,
straight
so he
up
created,
innovation.
in the midst of all this, he said, oh, I got an idea. And he went, okay, all right, I'm following you. Yep.
So he starts painting this grass. And if you just drove down the street, man, that's a healthy lawn. The guy's put no water on it. It's not growing, so he didn't have to cut it. That's right. But this guy's business explodes, right? Because people drive down the street and go, how in the heck do you have grass that look, and I think this area was in a drought. And so anyway, the guy is now just, his business is just taking off, right? So now, who would have thought that you could just spray paint people's lawn and people would pay money for it? Now, guess what happens after a few weeks and it rains? It looks a little weird, and they pay him to come back out and paint it and touch it up. So here's the deal. Here's what I'm finding. Now is the time to abandon tradition. I made a video about this. Abandon tradition. You can't get stuck on. We've always done it this way. These are major. This is an unprecedented time, right? You can't predict what's going to happen. So I was on this call with these 3 medical doctors over the weekend, and they were saying, the flu really breaks out in the fall and winter, so it's going to come back. We're going to get hit with it again. And so there are some companies that are conserving cash because they're waiting for phase 2 of the pandemic, right? So they're not spending any money. They're trying to conserve as much cash as possible because they think phase 2 is coming. So that's one of the things that's why we have to be innovative and creative, because it's not just the civil unrest that's taking place in the country right now. We also have a pandemic that's still in fact, I just talked to one of those doctors, works in Fort Worth, and he's saying, man, I'm watching death every single day just because the focus has shifted to the civil unrest. Don't think that this pandemic is still not taking people out. So because of these reasons, that's why we have to really be innovative and creative, and not be afraid to fail by taking some unique chances that you probably never thought you'd take before. I'm sure the landscaper guy never thought he'd be loading his truck with paint, right, instead of lawn equipment, but he's killing it right now, to his credit.
I love it. Yeah, you just hit on one of the questions I had coming into this, which is maybe you'll have some others, but are there any kind of old rules or old wisdom, from like 8 weeks ago, just not, but just kind of the prevailing wisdom that we used to have, maybe around risk taking, like you just mentioned, that now is a time when we need to say, hey, it's not that those aren't going to come back and be truths and the foundational, perspectives when we emerge. But right now, it's the time to either set those aside or put them on their ear. They're just not holding true right now. So that was a great example. Any others come to mind?
Regarding what used to work but no longer works?
Yeah, exactly. At least on hold or something, we need to look at it differently.
So here's what I've seen, even in my own business, right? And I was thinking about this yesterday, and I came up with these 3 things, right? And like, I'm sorry, man, I just want to just get right into it. Like the 3 things that I've seen that either in our own business or other companies that have really made a pivot that's, creating new revenue. One is, the first one I found was, just got to have major perseverance right now. because it's so extremely tough, man. You got to bring, you know, you have to bring this this incredible work ethic and an amazing amount of hope and trust that you can get through it, right? Because there's no rule book on this, right? No one's ever been in this situation before. So, for example, we had our biggest client, a Fortune 50 global bank, called and said we had a healthy 6 digits of revenue on the books, contracted, signed, dated, all that, over a 6-month stretch. That number of revenue over those 6 months could equal what we did all of 2019. That's how much we had. It went to zero just like that, completely got wiped out. So you're talking about, I got people lined up, tickets bought, hotels booked all over the country, right? And it gets decimated. So we go from that to, okay, what the heck are we going to do now? So they said, 100% of our work, we are face-to-face with the client. So it got switched to virtual overnight. So I have old videos saying you can never get the same quality virtually that you can do live. I was a big believer in that. Now we get the same feedback scores and the same feedback virtually that we were doing live.
Yeah.
And I'll share with you later how we've been able to pull that off. And I never thought we'd be able to do that. Go ahead.
I have a quick example too. Maybe we'll touch on more later, but just while I'm thinking about it, outside salespeople being kind of repurposed as inside salespeople. Normally I would have said, don't ever do that, ever. But I've seen it happen and actually work really well to my dismay, and so to your point, through perseverance and trying things that you would normally never try, you can still be successful. So please, go ahead. I don't want to get you.
No, I agree with the point. And those who adapt are going to win, man. That's where we are, right? Those who can adapt and turn and not get caught up in tradition, they're the ones who are going to win. And I'm seeing it in our own business because we're now turning that spout back on in terms of all that revenue that got locked up. We're now releasing that revenue, right? Because the client is saying, wow, I remember them saying, I really need this to work, the work that we're doing for them. We need this to work, so we don't want to do it virtually because we really need the results we're looking for. Well, now they're getting the results virtually and they're turning on more and more business. They're telling more people and it's spreading. But I also have to tell you, it was a massive amount of work, man. I probably called, demoed, or tested about 14 different virtual meeting software packages before we found the one that we would go. I'm talking sitting through demos and watching YouTube videos and testimonies, all this stuff, man. And then having to learn the software, having to not learn it, but master it, because these people are looking for results. I can't be on there, can't find the button, because they're paying a lot of money for this. And I remember I was going to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, man, 1 o'clock in the morning, in the midst of all this other crap that's been blowing up.
Yeah.
That's where the perseverance comes in. You gotta figure out a way. Like I said to myself, there's gotta be a way. I didn't know what the way was. I said, there's gotta be a way and I'm going to find it. And eventually we did.
Well, and I know you're on number one of your list, so we don't want to forget about that. But you, I just put an exclamation point on that speaking is one part of it. That's hard enough just to move that to virtual. But if you have any kind of workshop aspect of things and you need interaction and you need collaboration, that's really challenging to do also virtually. And to your point, if anything goes wrong, you have a breakout room technology or something, you have to have a backup because you have all these people's time. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of waste if anything goes wrong. So good job. I'm sure you did a really professional job there making it all work. I'd love to compare notes with you more too on that. I have
absolutely. Happy to share.
Too. So number one, major perseverance. You had a list of 3, I think.
Two. I'll go through those quickly and we can talk. I can't wait to hear back from the guys on here, but I was the second. I call it the PI principle, basically. P was perseverance. I is insight, because information is available everywhere. So if you're just giving information, you are officially wasting people's time. They want insight. So they want access to the information. But when you present the information, you say, okay, it's pretty clear the information says X, but what we're noticing is why, right? If you take a look at, and you start extracting new insights, new perspectives from that information that's been provided, we call that insight. In other words, helping them see what they can't see. Because if they have access to the same information we do, my kids can go online and find anything we can, right? So it's the insight that we provide. And I understand that's more difficult. That's why you talked about what used to work that doesn't anymore. Having some canned presentation where you're just clicking through, hey man, that stuff is done. That is just not going to get it done, right? It has to be a dialogue, and you have to be providing insight. Because otherwise, my sales coach told me, he said, man, whenever you're selling sales training or coaching, you better be the best salesperson in the room. So if all you can do is provide information, you're wasting their time. But if I can provide insight, meaning I can see what you can't see. I had a company say in the room, he said, how is it that this guy's been here for an hour and he can pick that up, and we work here every day? The best compliment you can ever get as a sales professional, not pitching products and services, but diagnosing their issues in real time, on the spot, right? Not going home doing some exhaustive analysis with a team of people, but in the moment, able to kind of figure out what the potholes are and just throw it right back in their face. And the best discussion I can ever have in a sales call is an argument, where they're going, no, you didn't do that. Well, I thought like, where they discover in the conversation that they have holes in their game plan, which is not what most salespeople will probably advocate, but that's exactly where I want to get to.
I love it. It's Patrick Lencioni's book on getting naked, right? He talks about that. He talks about, I forget what he calls it. It's something like go into danger, like go into it, lean into it.
Right.
Pursue. Most people, that's something that's uncomfortable. Most people would say, oh, I'm going to step away to maybe just kind of let that uncomfortableness, we'll get back to the agenda or what have you. He says, no, actually go right into it. That's where the magic is. You also made me think of one other thing, just a tagline that I think really says it all. The founder of Auto Trader, when I worked a lot with him when I was in Atlanta, and he gave a keynote speech, and he talked about, of course, Auto Trader, a lot of people may not realize they have a lot of data, and they were really making a big data drive. And so the title of his speech was Swimming in Data, Thirsting for Knowledge. I just love that statement, what all it says. Or to your point about there's data, and then there's actually knowledge and insight.
That's good.
So yeah, well said. So PIE, I know the E, but I know everybody else is eager to hear.
What's the E?
Your third in your list.
What's your E? What'd you think it was?
Oh, well, you want me to steal your thunder? Because I think I know it.
Well, go for it, man. Ain't no thunder here. Go for it.
No, wait a minute. Do I need to pay you a royalty or anything?
I was just curious to see if you picked up where I was going with it.
Empathy, right?
Absolutely, man. Especially now. I had a call yesterday, so I'm on a call, and as you guys probably do, I go on LinkedIn, check them out. And the lady I was talking to, think about doing business together, she's in Minneapolis, and I just said, "Wow, how is it being a resident of Minneapolis right now?" And for 10 minutes of a 30-minute call, man, that's what we talked about. But what was cool was, now most salespeople will tell you never do something like that, but we're dealing with human beings who are hurting, who are emotional, right? And so if you ignore that part of the process, man, you're going to miss it every single time. Why? Because what I was sharing with her is I'm concerned about you. And I'm just asking her questions and allowing her to feedback. And we had a really cool dialogue. And what was sweet about it is she's a white female. Obviously I'm a black male, but we were able to connect at the heart, man, and just share our stories and experiences. She valued and validated the pain I was going through. Her two twin daughters actually work at the Target. Target's coming in the picture so much because their headquarters are there. I'm sure you guys probably knew that. And so the Target got all destroyed, and she was just sharing her story. So empathy, but asking questions, and more importantly, listening to what they are personally going through. Now, keep in mind, it had nothing to do with business, right? Nothing to do with what we were scheduled to talk about. But I just think connecting at the heart is just more critical than it's ever. I've always talked about it. I just think it's much more crucial than it has been in the past.
Yeah, I think it's inauthentic, right? And what we all want is authenticity in each other and in our relationships. And then we love doing business together too, with people who are being real and authentic.
Sure, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess we're at a little after halfway. We definitely have some more questions we can go through, but why don't we pause for a minute, get folks to react to your PIE. Love that model. We can share. I know we have some excellent sellers. I know I've personally gone on sales calls with Mr. Charles Smith. I know how good of a sales person carrying the bag and also sales leader Charles is. And then Charlie also, I know from your background, although I know you tip your hat to other sales folks. I know you and Richard, especially back in the day, went on a lot of four-legged sales calls and had a lot of fun in the early technology days. And then I just know actually the other two who are here, Jonathan and Andrew as well. I say other two, there are others who aren't sharing their video right now. So I know we have more as well. But anyway, let me pause. I'll just open up the floor and kind of pass the mic. So anybody have a thought or question for Brian about the PIE?
I have one, Brian, when it comes to empathy and the word selling right now, the nuance is like beyond critical. So the sensitivity is even so much heightened, so to the point where I made a public post personally on LinkedIn to address what happened in Minnesota and the grief for the loss of life. And someone hit me up on LinkedIn, even posting publicly for standing against hate. And I'm also selling for SurveyMonkey at the same time. I got one note. I got one thank you from someone that was of color. And then I got one person that was in LA that basically called me a racist for not being more explicit. How do you be so sensitive and show your heart and that you're for and against hate and also sell socially and publicly? I don't know if that's helpful or it's even a wrong question, but I just was curious if on the E part, the empathy part, how do we navigate this as sales professionals?
So I think sales professionals are people, right? At the end of the day, you're selling to people, we're people. And my granddad taught me all money ain't good money. And he told me, don't try to get all the money. I don't need all the money. All money ain't good money. So if I post something about a truth that I believe in and you don't want to do business with me or misunderstand me based on the truth, dude, move on, right? I have that I lose no sleep on something like that. Here's the thing. People quote Dr. King a lot, but they always quote, I have a dream. Like he just slept all the damn time. I have a dream. My little girls are going to join hands with, but he also wrote a letter from a Birmingham jail when he was jailed for peacefully protesting. And in that letter, he says, a riot is a voice of the unheard, right? My preference is not that riots, and I call it a rebellion. You can call it what you want. A rebellion takes place because the system that's put in place did not work for a group of people in this country. It doesn't work, right? You say being judged by a jury of peers. Well, there are peers in the jury box that hate me because of what I look like. I have no fair trial, right? Not for me. It's a different America. It's a different America. When I moved my family from California to Texas, I had a talk with my boys. I had to sit down and talk with my boys, man. It's, hey, man, we're getting ready to move to Texas. It's going to be different there, right? If you get stopped by the cops, man, you got to be quiet, keep your hands on the steering wheel. Don't move quick. Don't reach for your wallet. Don't roll your window down. I have to talk to my boys like this, man. Why? I just want them to come home. Get your ticket, man. Just come back to the house, right? I just want you to get a ticket. That's a really good day. Or just get arrested and put in hand. That's a really good day. But don't get shot out there, man. Because what you saw on video, that's our life, man. That's not news to us. Gregory Taylor, dude, that's like, I don't know what the count is now, right? We're in the double digits, triple digits now. So thankfully it was captured on video. But to answer your question more specifically, I would be true to who you are. Speak truth to power. Now, am I advocating being rude and disrespectful? No, but to put out a message on what you believe, I mean, think of it this way. If you put out a message on what you believe about climate change or what you believe about, I don't know, taxes or what you believe about some sports team, well, that's okay. That's who you are. That's what you believe. So if you stand out on a topic like this, I would applaud it personally. And I think if people don't get that, I just keep it moving personally.
I'd also add to that, Brian, that there's a difference between one-on-one intimate communication. Even in this setting, this is a more intimate setting. We know each other. I mean, even those of you who haven't met yet, you know that I love all you guys, and we have a, we have a safe group here or whatever. So there's a certain level of intimacy. And then there's, I mean, I've always thought of it, not even just in this time, but I've always thought of the mob, the social media mob. And the mob mentality is not always rational. They're operating from hate and a lot of other things, a lot of emotion, a lot of raw emotions. And then they're just bad actors out there too, that when you come to social media, they just want to nitpick. And I mean, so I think, Andrew, I know where you're coming from. Andrew's a unique seller in that he sells social. So his personal persona that he portrays is out there. It's just how he is, how he operates. So it's more difficult, I think, for you, Andrew, to separate the two. I'm not as active socially, so.
I think can I say a few things?
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
I was talking to this about my son, who's a salesman, by the way. He's just starting his career in sales. He's been in sales for about 2 years. And he made a comment. He said, any white guy that posts anything about this is going to look stupid, period. Okay. So you sit there and you go, yeah. I just love, the things that just annoy the heck out of me. I know Andrew Young, I know his background. He was close to Martin Luther King. I know what he thinks and read his books. And, one person said that posted here, pretty high profile, says, I really, my heart goes out, to George Floyd and his family and to all those who are protesting, and I am saying this from a position of privilege, and I sit there and I'm like, oh my God, and I remember talking to to Andrew Young, and he says, I tell black people, he said, look, he didn't ask to be born white. You didn't ask to be born black. It's just the way we are. We're just people. So when I think about this, and Brian, maybe you could help me with this, is to this point on empathy, I think, which is very, very important, is that we can put a post out there on climate change, because climate change is a horizontal, non-personal issue. But I can't put a post out there as a white man, okay, when on such a personal issue, like you spoke to so clearly, and I appreciate that, on how you had explained to your sons, how do they needed to be careful, when stopped by the police. I mean, that is clearly not a horizontal issue. I can't relate to that issue, okay? My biggest fear is getting a ticket. Their biggest fear is I can get killed, okay? That's a pretty wide expanse. So on the empathy standpoint, I think that it's the only people that can speak today, given this horrible situation that's gone on, and this disruption that's happened in our society. And quite frankly, I'm here and I'm very upset, and that I'm disappointed in who we are as human beings, okay? Just watching everything go on. But I think the only people that have a voice today are the people who feel victimized. I think the only people who can speak are the blacks. They're the only people who are being held down, and being pushed back, we can't tell people how to feel and how to act, and we don't know this experience your boys have. So the empathy side and speaking in sales is to truly do what I think you did, Brian, to this white woman, and just say, what's it like for you there in Minneapolis? And let her just unload, right? As opposed to, well, let me tell you what I think about this whole, no, it's not important what you think. What's important is what she thinks. She has no release. Okay.
What
made
do you
a
think?
super connection that way. But I'll go back to and finish with what my son said, which there's nothing a white guy or woman can put out in this situation that doesn't make them look trite or stupid. Okay. That's kind of where it's at.
What do you think, Brian?
I think, first of all, I appreciate Charles's comments. I was listening intently as you were speaking, and I think two thoughts. One is, you know, it's so raw and so real and so present. We can't even do a sales webinar, right?
I know.
It just it just interrupts everything. So to act like it's not there is just foolishness. I'll get back to Charles' point because I got like 8 thoughts in my head. So I think I agree with you, actually. I'm glad you brought that up, because when I read comments from well-meaning white people, in some cases Christians, unless, I will make a disclaimer, if it's just expressing empathy and sympathy, 100% agree. Do that all day long, right? But if you're trying to explain the situation and trying to give an angle and perspective on it, please be quiet, right? Just please be quiet, because there's a pretty good chance you're going to miss something, because this is not new to us, right? I've been living this my whole life, right? This is not new. It's not a new discovery, epiphany, right? I've never committed a crime in my life, and I had a business guy try to offer me a crooked deal, and I said, dude, I'm done. I don't even want to, even if it's offered to me, I don't want to do it. But yet I've had 2 police officers draw guns on me before. No criminal record, no doing anything. I'm driving to church with my wife, right? And so with that said, unless you've been through something like that, right, it's going to be very difficult for you to have an accurate perspective on it. Now, here's what I believe. I believe education and conversation is how we get past this. Education and conversation. So people I've had a few right friends call me, Andrew being one of them, and said, ask me 2 questions. Hey man, how you doing? Hey man, how can I help? Hey man, how you doing? How can I help? I love those phone calls. And education, people have asked me, Brian, what can I do? I said, man, look, the best thing you can do, in my opinion, it's just mine, is watch the documentary on Netflix called 13th. It is the most accurate and just, well, it's just a great film on how systemic racism is in this country. It was planned, it was orchestrated. There were laws written to lock my people up, to keep them locked up. The way the prison system is run is to keep us there. It's the education, it was all orchestrated, start to finish, to imprison us. And if we're not in prison, to keep us from being as successful as other people groups. And it was so well done that there were politicians, white politicians, who later came out and said that what work that we did, those laws have created so much destruction to the Black community. I hate that I did it. I hate that we passed those laws and we did what we did. So watching the documentary 13th, and then that's the education, and then having a conversation about it, right? Just hey, have you ever been affected by that? How did I explain this stupid, I wasn't arrested, but they tried to. And I just explained the story to the guy, and his jaw was on the table the whole time I'm talking. Like, he did that. How did you? And I'm just going, dude, that was 1 of 3 times. And he's just in shock because he knows me, right? And so I think the education and the conversation is how we get a better understanding, so we can get a better perspective. Scripture says, in all thy getting, get understanding. And I think without a proper understanding, this thing just perpetuates. And to Charlie's point, I would agree. I think, like, I would not try to speak as an authority on anything that I'm not an authority of and I haven't lived through and walked through, right? You talk about sales, presentation, conversation.
That's very personal.
That's that's even more so, because it's more personal. Then I'll stop there because I see the time.
Well, and I also say, when it comes to empathy, the definition everybody's, of course, we all know, we've all been sales trained, is putting yourself in the shoes of somebody. Well, you can't put yourself in someone else's shoes unless you listen to them, unless you study them. And so, I think both of y'all are making the point that if you're telling and talking, then you're not listening. You're not going to be able to empathize. You might, but you're not going to have enough good information to really empathize.
I want to say this real quick on that topic. I think the reason why, and I saw this yesterday, the reason why this topic is so difficult is when I'm sharing my story, my experience, it's so removed from what a lot of white people go through. They really struggle to just understand it, man, just genuinely. Like, they just have a hard, you talk about getting in other people's shoes. They just really have a hard time understanding that we're treated like that. And I think the video is just the most extreme and grotesque display of racism in the country. When you literally hear a man crying out for his life and bystanders doing the same thing, and everyone, you know, it's very clear what's about to happen, but the guy committing the crime is completely, you know, is irrelevant of what's actively taking place. But I think the reason why empathy is so important is asking questions and then listening to the answer. And if you don't understand it, just ask another question, right? And just continue asking questions. And at some point, you're just going to have to believe it as truth. You may not be able to relate to it very well, but you just may have to believe it as truth, whether it makes sense or not.
I know Ben has his hand raised, and I want to make one more
question too.
point. That I think, you know, it's so important to have respect for the other person. So we're able to talk about this. We can, because we respect each other. I know I have a client who is in a homosexual lifestyle, very liberal, and I don't really bring up politics, but she does all the time. And so we just have a respectful I love her to death. She knows that I love her, and she loves me. And we talk about stuff, and it's difficult, but I respect her. She respects me. We talk about it. And so you can do it. You can't do that with a mob, Andrew. Back to, you know, you don't have that same type of relationship. So I think that's part of what you're running into.
Well, and the scripture says, don't cast your pearls before swine for that reason, right? They just don't value it, won't get it.
Thank you. Andrew, or Ben, rather, you had your hand raised. I'm pointing.
Yeah, I actually just want to further clarify my question, because I did want to make it relevant to sales before Charlie gave his very particular perspective. So Brian, the reason I asked the question is, and I'll just let this finish and I'll let you get back to what you were doing, is I think that personally in my 34 years, white people are complicit most of the time, because they don't say anything, they don't do anything, they don't ask anything, and they're very comfortable saying it's an other issue. I'm of the persuasion, because I love you and other friends that I have great relationships with, by the way, Charlie, I would just like to say, I would like to stand against that while maintaining a sales persona, whatever that crap is. I'm just trying to say, like, with the little bit of influence that I do, the 1% that can't even speak to it, I'm unqualified, like I said in my post, to speak on it, but I just want to, you're one of my best friends in the world, right? And so is Ryan, and Ryan's white and you're not. And so I would rather publicly show some sort of effort.
Why'd you say white first? So I'm just trying to add a little bit of lightheartedness, and just gotta keep going, Andrew. And then we'll wrap your.
And finishing is, like, Brian, whatever you tell me, I'm going to take as the gospel truth, and then I'm going to make changes to whatever I said or did. That's how much I'm submitted to our friendship, and as someone I look up and respect. So before I got the question, Charlie, you know, gave his point of view, and it's sensitive. It's more sensitive than anything else. It's even more sensitive than faith. It's, to me, because you're living it. And so for me, I've spent 34 years not speaking up publicly about the issue, whereas I'm unqualified to even speak upon it. But I'd rather be bloodied and in battle, like Theodore Roosevelt says, than to be some bystander.
Yes, sir.
As anything.
Just the fact that we're having this discussion, I mean, God is going to use all this disgusting stuff that we're seeing, and good is going to come from it, and it is going to be painful to get through a lot of this. But I mean, we would have never had this discussion. I mean, maybe one-on-one, some of it comes up a little here and there. And Andrew, to your point, I mean, I don't speak out. I don't speak out publicly about a lot. It's just not, I'm not active, you know, speaking with personal positions. But also to Charlie's point, you know, I mean, some of it is just going to backfire. Like, that's not the way to do it. So I think that comes across as silence and being complicit in this, and that I somehow, you know, I'm a racist because I haven't spoken out about it. So there's just a lot of raw feelings. And I know Ben has patiently had his hand up. I want to get to Ben, and then I want to give Brian any parting thoughts too. So Ben, what is it? What's on your mind?
I was going to wave my real hand too, just to get your attention. Hey, okay, you disabled screen sharing. That's okay. I wanted to share a quote that landed with me in a particular way that gave me some perspective on this issue, and then also on sales, because I never really knew what privilege meant. You know, if you asked me if I have privilege or white privilege, I would say, no, I don't have that, right? Because I respect people of color and I don't see that in that particular way. When I saw this quote, I said, oh, I do have privilege, and I think everybody has privilege, and especially in a sales environment. And the quote is, privilege is when you think something is not a problem because it's not a problem to you personally. And that hit me this past week when I said, wow, privilege is when you think something's not a problem because it's not a problem to you personally. And I think we all have that privilege, if you look at it that way, at any given time, where it's not a problem to me, therefore it is not a problem. And whether it's race or whether it is you trying to sell a product or being sold a product, it goes back to what you said, Brian, is empathy. Is it just because it's not a problem to you, that does not mean a problem doesn't exist. And if we can remind ourselves of that is privilege, and put ourselves in the other person's shoes, then I think we can get the sale. We can have somebody listen to us. We can ask those questions. And I love what Charlie said, is that in order to understand if something is a problem to somebody else, you usually have to ask questions. And it might be, is this a problem for you? Right? Are you dealing with something right now that I don't know about? And I like the idea of asking a question to get to that point of understanding if there is a problem from a sales perspective, right? So that we may be able to provide a solution for them, because that's our job as salespeople, is to provide a solution for a problem that the other person is experiencing right now. So I just, when I saw that quote, I didn't think about it from a sales standpoint. I obviously thought about it in the context of what's going on right now. And I'm going, man, I have some serious privilege, because there were things that I did not think were problems because they weren't a problem to me. But hearing you talk about sales and hearing Charlie talk about asking questions, I think that's very applicable to a sales environment.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah.
My closest sales and client relationships come from authenticity and not avoiding topics and disagreeing, maybe on deeply personal topics, but we're able to have a respectful dialogue and truly seeking to understand the other person. That's empathy. And that should be, man, that enters into your sales process. And it's just a whole new world, right? Brian, any thoughts as we're closing up here?
Hey, Brian, if you could, in your thoughts, if you could address that with the first one was perseverance.
Yes.
I understood insight and empathy, because those are very much relational issues. Okay. I didn't understand the perseverance and how that kind of clicked in with the other two. I don't know if you could tie up with that.
Yeah, so that was just in the context of what's happening in the economy and the marketplace. It's like, we just got slammed by COVID. Everything got shut down, and perseverance is what's going to get us through it. That's really what that was speaking to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Were there any more questions I want to make? I don't know if I missed someone earlier.
Well, let's do this too. Just since we're at the hour, I'll stay on and turn out the lights like I always do. And if anybody else wants to stay on, please do. Well,
I have to leave, but I just want to thank Brian. Brian, thank you so much, man. This is great. Okay. God bless you and your family.
Thank you, brother.
The thing that we could do as Christians, loving in our society is defined, in my mind, 67-year-old guy, as listening, really listening. So take care.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And speaking of,
we'll end on that note. I will say real quickly in closing, I may shuffle around the frequency of these, so watch out for that, but I'll look to see y'all again soon. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'll stay on and turn out the lights, and Brian, you're welcome if you'd like to. Y'all have a great day. See you soon.
And I just want to say happy birthday, Ryan.
Hey, yeah, thanks. Older and older every day.
Oh, happy birthday, brother. I didn't know, man.
Yeah, a couple years away from the big 5-0 now.
Hey, I really appreciate you guys listening, man. And it means a lot to me to just have this heart-to-heart conversation. There's a lot of healing that happens through this kind of dialogue. So I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Ryan,
Brian.
how do we participate in the virtual workshop on closing more sales virtually?
Thank you. I'll send that to all of you guys, but do you want to send it or how do you want to do that, Brian?
Shoot, dude, you just caught me. It's on Thursday. I'll send the link if I had it. Actually, I'm on a call right now to prepare for it, to talk about it. But Ryan, you have the link and you just send it out. Send it out. I appreciate it.
I will. I have a minute after this. I'll do it. I'm not running right to another meeting.
Look
Thanks,
forward-
guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for the question, Charles. See you guys. God bless. Bye-bye.